Life has a strange way of teaching us lessons we never expected to learn. Sometimes, the biggest transformations don't come from the advice of elders, from books, or from years of experience. They come from the innocent words of a child. My journey toward rediscovering love and reshaping the path of my life began on an ordinary evening, in the soft glow of a home I thought I had built perfectly. Yet, one small conversation with my son, Ayan, shifted everything I believed to be unshakable. I was a man in my mid-30s, a husband, and most importantly, a father. To the world outside, my life appeared content. I had a respectable job, a decent house, and a wife who had been my partner since our early 20s. But beneath that surface, the foundation of our marriage had started to wear thin. We were living together, yet we were distant, two people sharing the same roof, but with hearts separated by silence. I often told myself it was normal. Life gets busy, responsibilities pile up, and love sometimes hides behind the curtains of routine. Still, there was an ache in me, a longing I couldn't name. I had stopped confiding in my wife, and she had stopped looking at me with the warmth I remembered from our younger days. We didn't fight, but we didn't connect either. Our conversations revolved around bills, groceries, or our child's school. And perhaps I would have kept drifting in that silence forever, had Ayan not spoken to me that evening. It was a Sunday. The sky outside was painted with shades of orange, the kind of sunset that demands to be noticed. I was sitting on the couch, scrolling absent-mindedly on my phone, while Ayan, only 8 years old, sat beside me drawing with his colored pencils. He was a curious child, thoughtful beyond his age, and sometimes his questions left me unsettled. That day was no different. "Baba," he said softly, without lifting his eyes from the paper, "do you love Mama?" The question was simple, but it landed like a storm in my heart. I looked at him, startled, unsure of how to respond. Children often ask what adults avoid saying out loud, and in that instant, I realized how visible the cracks in our marriage had become. "Of course I do," I replied quickly, almost defensively. "Why would you ask that?" Ayan paused, chewing on his pencil. "Because you don't smile at her anymore. And she doesn't smile at you either. My teacher says people who love each other smile a lot. I don't see it much between you and Mama." His words pierced deeper than any argument, deeper than any self-reflection I had attempted over the years. I wanted to assure him, to explain that adults show love differently, but the truth was staring me in the face. He was right. I had stopped smiling at my wife, not because I didn't care for her, but because somewhere along the way, I had stopped seeing her the way I once did. And perhaps she had done the same with me. That night, after putting Ayan to bed, I lay awake thinking about his words. They echoed in the silence of our room, where my wife, Amina, slept facing the other side, her breath steady but her back turned to me, as it had been for years. I realized I had two choices: continue drifting apart until we became strangers under one roof, or confront the reality that we had both been avoiding. The next morning, I did something I hadn't done in years. I asked Amina to have tea with me in the garden before I left for work. She looked surprised but agreed. As we sat in the gentle morning air, the awkwardness between us was almost unbearable. Finally, I broke the silence. "Do you think Ayan notices us?" "The distance." Her eyes flickered, and she looked down at her cup. "He notices everything," she whispered. "He's more perceptive than we give him credit for." I nodded. "Yesterday, he asked me if I love you, and I couldn't answer him the way I should have. Not because I don't love you, Amina, but because I don't know if I've been showing it." Tears welled in her eyes, and for the first time in years, she let her guard down. "I've been feeling the same. I thought maybe you didn't need me the way you once did. I thought maybe we were just living for him now, not for us." That conversation became the first step of a journey neither of us had anticipated. It wasn't easy. Rebuilding love isn't as simple as saying the words or holding hands again. It requires effort, patience, and vulnerability. But that single question from Ayan had forced us to confront the truth. We had stopped trying. In the weeks that followed, Amina and I made small changes. We started having dinner together without distractions, sharing stories of our day. I left small notes for her before work, reminders that I still noticed her. She began surprising me with gestures I had long forgotten, the way she used to bring me my favorite tea, or the way she laughed at my old jokes even if they weren't funny. Slowly, I began to see her again, not as just the mother of my child, not as just the woman I had married years ago, but as the person I had fallen in love with. And perhaps she began to see me again too. The journey was far from perfect. There were days when old habits resurfaced, when silence felt easier than conversation. But whenever we faltered, I remembered Ayan's innocent voice asking, "Do you love Mama?" And it reminded me why I was trying. Months later, something extraordinary happened. Ayan came to me one evening, his eyes bright, and said, "Baba, you smiled at Mama today." And she smiled back. "I like it when you do that." It was then that I realized, children don't just need parents who provide, they need parents who love, visibly and unapologetically. Because the love between parents shapes the way a child understands love in the world. That one conversation with my child didn't just alter the direction of my life. It saved my marriage, restored my home, and reminded me of the power of love when it is nurtured. And now, years later, when I sit with Amina and watch Ayan growing into a young man, I often think back to that sunset, that drawing session, and that simple question. It taught me that sometimes the greatest wisdom doesn't come from age, it comes from innocence. And that love, no matter how lost it may seem, can always be found again if we are willing to search for it together.